welcome to the Daily Debate, live Thursdays with Taghreed Hussein. Always a pleasure to be your host for tonight. Usually on Thursdays, we are wrapping up important headlines that has been in the news throughout the whole week. Egypt was the last leg in the UN Secretary General Middle East tour. We'll be discussing more concerning the analysis of this important visit. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi held talks with the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, expressing readiness to further cooperate with the United Nations in solving regional issues. And in a press conference with the UN Secretary General after the meeting, Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry said that Egypt supported the UN efforts in regional crises, including Syria, Libya, as well as the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. The UN Secretary General has praised Egypt's role and said that Egypt is considered as a central player and absolutely an essential contributor to finding a solution to the regional problems, and reiterated also further commitment in fighting terrorism. On this episode on the Daily Debate for tonight, I have all the honor and pleasure to have with His Excellency Ambassador Mohamed Shazly, former assistant to the Foreign Minister. Mr. Ambassador, thank you for coming tonight.
The pleasure is all mine.
Thank you, Excellency, for coming. And I do have with me also Honorable Mr. Mohamed Kholy, former UN media consultant. Mr. Kholy, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
And with this distinctive panel, we'll be reading that important headline, knowing more concerning the Middle East tour on behalf of the UN Secretary General, the first actually since he assumed office. This report highlighting his meeting with Excellency President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, that was a contribution by our colleague Linda Abdel Latif, and we'll be back.
Abdel Fattah al-Sisi met UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres at the Ittihadiyya Palace. During the meeting, President al-Sisi congratulated Guterres for the post of the UN Secretary General and referred to the concern that Egypt has always given to the role played by the UN in enhancing international cooperation on all levels, which reflects Egypt's active participation in the activities of the UN in light of its current membership in the Security Council and for being an active contributor in the different UN peacekeeping process. President al-Sisi also referred to the importance of working on enhancing international efforts to reach political solutions for the crises in the region, thus besides increasing the international efforts to fight terrorism and extremism. The President also referred to the importance of exerting more efforts to revive the peace process between the Palestinian and the Israeli sides, stressing that reaching a just and a final solution for the Palestinian issue would provide a new reality in the region and would participate in regaining stability there. President al-Sisi also referred to the efforts exerted by Egypt to reach a solution for the Libyan crisis, stressing that Egypt is keen on not interfering in the internal affairs of the countries, adding that the country is also keen on preserving the unity and integrity of the Libyan territory and its people. For his part, Guterres emphasized that his visit to the country comes within the framework of Egypt being a pivotal pillar of stability and security in the region. And regarding the Syrian crisis, Guterres said that the UN is keen on working on reaching a political settlement that will end the humanitarian suffering of the Syrians. Guterres also emphasized on the importance of enhancing the national reconciliation efforts in Iraq and said that he is looking forward that the current year will witness political solutions in Yemen and Libya. And following the meeting, Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry and Guterres held a joint press conference. Speaking at the press conference, Shoukry wished success for the UN chief in light of the major challenges facing the world. Shoukry also highlighted the mediation role played by Egypt to reach consensus between Libyan parties on a political settlement for the crisis in the country, and said that Egypt backs efforts by the UN envoy for Syria to reach a settlement for the conflict, adding that Egypt supports dialogue between Syrian government and rebels. And for his part, Guterres held Egypt's leading role in settling crisis in the Middle East and reiterated that there is no alternative to the two-state solution to the Palestinian issue. The UN chief also expressed appreciation to Egypt for hosting a huge number of refugees escaping conflicts in the region without receiving the support of the international community. The meeting of President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi with the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres comes within the leading and influential role Egypt plays and within its continuous successful efforts to overcome the challenges facing the region. Linda Abdel Latif, Nile TV International.
Mr. Ambassador, well, it's the first tour for the UN Secretary General since he assumed office, and seeing eye to eye with Egypt is very important vis-a-vis solving many problems, many regional problems. So from your opinion, a reading and an assessment into that important story.
The Secretary General chose the Middle East as his first foreign tour. This, reflects the situation in the Middle East. It is the most volatile region in the world. You have an explosive situation in Libya, an explosive situation in Iraq, an explosive situation in Syria. You have a very dangerous confrontation between the Gulf Arab states and Iran. You have, if you go further to the Arab world, Somalia, which everybody forgets it's an Arab country, a member of the Arab League. So all this makes the Middle East a very volatile region. I think no other region in the world is as volatile as the Middle East. The Secretary General visited several pivotal countries in the Middle East and concluded his tour by a visit to Egypt. Egypt is a founding member of the United Nations. Egypt's foreign policy has always taken international legality and the resolutions of the Security Council as a basis of its movement. On the Palestinian issue, all our efforts are centered on the UN resolutions on Middle East and Palestine. If you look at what happened in Iraq, Egypt participated in liberating Kuwait because it was under the auspices of the United Nations Security Council resolution, and abstained from participating in the campaign against Iraq, and because it was not covered under the umbrella of the United Nations, and therefore the United States formed what is called the willing partners, which is outside the international legality. So all of this makes Egypt is one, I think it is one of the most countries contributing to the peacekeeping operations of the United Nations in Africa and all over the world. So all of this gives Egypt a special weight and a special position vis-a-vis the United Nations.
Definitely, Egypt is a central player, as has been described by the UN Secretary General. Mr. Kholy, reading the character of the UN Secretary General and his vision, and knowing more about his vision specifically, how do you read the personality of Guterres, and in what way is his approach going to be quite different from the predecessors?
In fact, when I read the personality of the Secretary General, I have to go back to his own career before he assumed the post of the Secretary General. He was, as you know, the Prime Minister of Portugal. Portugal can be considered, it's a Mediterranean country. You see, it is so close to Africa, especially North Africa. It has a lot of historic relations with Africa during the 19th century, and therefore he is, I think, as a prime minister of his country, he was aware, had close relations about the Middle Eastern questions, especially, not only terrorism. Terrorism is now, but let's talk about the Palestinian question, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, which is now more than 60 years now. So I think he came armed with, equipped with all this experience, which is first-hand experience, and I think when I compare him as an ex-United Nations staff to his own people, who had his own career, mostly they were not from our region, with the exception of Dr. Boutros Ghali. You see, either Hammarskjöld was from Northern Europe, Waldheim was from Western Europe. The other, Perez was from Latin America. Yothante was from Asia, you see. And even Kofi Annan, yes, he was so close to us, but he was from Western Africa. This man was so close to the Middle East, and therefore I think he knows not only the Middle Eastern problem, terrorism now, underdevelopment, internal conflicts, civil wars, as you know, but I think he stopped a long time meditating, reflecting on Egypt as a pivotal state.
Yeah.
Egypt is a pivotal state as far as Africa is concerned, as far as the problem in Libya, the civil strife in Libya, as far as the conflict between the Israelis and the Palestinian question in general. Not only important only through the geographic dimension, but through the steps which Egypt had always taken along the history of all these problems and these issues. And therefore, I was so admiring him, politically speaking, when he spoke his mind, even from Cairo, that he aspires to tackle the Palestinian-Israeli problem.
Yes.
From the perspective of the two-state solution.
Yes, and he said that there is no plan B in that respect.
Yes.
He was very much clear
and he was adamant about that.
Decisive.
Yes, and this declaration and this statement has its own value in the light of the recent developments, which is now the result of the talks between Netanyahu and Mr. Trump in Washington.
Right. Excellency, you've attended the lecture that was given by the new UN Secretary General at Cairo University. What was your impression as he addressed the audience? And tell me more about how it was circulated, the repercussions, the impact on the people listening to him. What were the main issues that has been raised?
I think the first thing is the message. Of giving a speech in the Cairo University. This is a homage to the cultural heritage of Egypt. Cairo University represents the modern culture of Egypt. We have the pharaonic, the Islamic, the Coptic, but all of this is now crystallized since the beginning of the 20th century in the Cairo University. So I think this is the message, is a homage to Egyptian culture. The Secretary General spoke about Egypt's cultural heritage, what Egypt has given to humanity. The Secretary General also spoke about Islam and how he comes from the Iberian Peninsula, where there was the Andalusian civilization, Islamic civilization, and how this has had its impact on Europe, therefore denying all claims that Islam is a religion of violence or a religion that is against civilization. You have spoken about, or my colleague has spoken about the Palestinian issue. He also, I think, what is very important in his speech, he spoke about two issues. And the first was the climatic change and how dangerous it is and how we should prepare ourselves to face this problem. This is a very serious problem, and unfortunately, I don't think it is taking the enough media
space,
and space that it should have.
Right.
He also spoke about a very important thing about the youth and enabling the youth and investing in youth. I think also that is very important, especially for our region in the world where a majority of our population are in the youth category. And also, I think we should also notice that the last African summit was dedicated to enabling the youth.
Right. Enabling the youth is very important. Always we're talking, Mr. Kholy, as His Excellency has emphasized about the importance of the youth, our treasure, injecting new blood. While the headlines come also talking about the UN reform and from the eyes of an expert at the United Nations. How do you see this sense of injecting efforts of the youth? How can it reform and help in reforming the UN body?
I think a healthy start on the part of Mr. Guterres. On his agenda, he has the terrorism, which is now an international scourge.
Right.
At the same time, the environment, as Mr. the Ambassador said, about the change, the climate change, you see. I think development, climate change, even terrorism, all these issues have a lot of connection with the youth, the role of the youth, the education of the youth, the awareness of youth, and the youth are exposed for being recruited in the ranks of jihadists and
the brainwashing that happens to them.
Yes. Therefore, I think the Secretary General, when he was talking about that, in his mind there was the cultural dimension, the educational dimension, and the media dimension. The role of the media in all these things. And I think this is a very healthy start, in my opinion, on his agenda. And when he talks this in Cairo University, in Egypt, he realizes and he's giving us an idea that he is convinced of Egypt as a role country. Yes, as a role country in Africa, you see, as a role country in the Arab world, as a role country in the Mediterranean, and in the same time now Egypt is as a member, a non-permanent member in the Security Council, and therefore when he tries to ask for the help or the cooperation of Egypt on the level of the presidency, on the level of the university, on the level of the foreign affairs ministry and the department, I think he strikes the right tone. That this is a very important country, a pivotal state, strategically speaking, and therefore when he starts this healthy start, in my opinion, I think this is a good thing and this is a promising thing. But myself, as a politician, I should have my reservations because we have a very bitter experience in Cairo University. I'm referring to Mr. Obama's speech when he came here and he raised our promises and our hopes, but he failed us through the 8 years of his presidency.
Excellency, Mr. Kholy described it as a healthy start. How can we build on that healthy start vis-a-vis coordination concerning different regional files and cooperation with the UN body?
I think, in Egypt we have a very well-established diplomatic corps. I think the diplomatic corps of Egypt is one of the highly respected diplomatic corps in the world. Very professional, very well trained. This is one of the cornerstones of our movement in the international arena. We have also, the media has a very important role to play. The NGOs has a very important role to play. We have quite an old United Nations NGO, Friends of the United Nations, and very prominent personalities. I think also they have a role to play. Let me just make a small comment on enabling the youth, because I think this is a very important question for the future. We cannot expect to face a bright future if we do not change our attitude towards youth. The youth today is a completely different matter than youth in my days. In my days, if I wanted to ask about something, I asked an elder person. I asked my father, I asked my teacher, and so on. Youth today, they don't ask their parents. They go to the internet and find out whatever they want to find out. So this is a new generation, an independent generation from, it has cut the umbilical cord with its the previous generations. If we want to
invest in them,
keep a guiding hand, it has to be
coaching
done very skillfully, without imposition, because they will not accept imposition. So this, the whole educational system, the whole media system, the whole family system, relation between father and son, mother and daughter, has to change drastically.
Right. Definitely, as Mr. Ambassador says, that the role of the youth is considered to be detrimental. And the role of the media, mentioning the role of the media, and we have with us a media expert, Mr. Kholy. Tell us more about how the media plays a very important role in disseminating this culture and vis-a-vis the United Nations and the sense of a vision that should be delivered and the issues that should be raised.
Yes, I'll use the word adapt instead of change, because it's very easy that as a simple person like my humble self, I say you have to change. No, you have to adapt, because as the ambassador said, things changed drastically according to our generations, my generation, his generation. Now we have a lot of things which are unexpected in the 21st century. You see, today I was writing about something, I was reading about something and writing about something. The new cars, which are driverless, no drivers, and they can be driven, or they can go ahead like an aeroplane. You see, in any square, in any city. This is something which even myself, who is following things all over the world, it is something new, let alone the young man, 20 years. You see, they will live in the age of the robots. You see, we lived in the age of the aeroplane. That was the dernier cri in our life, you see. So we have to adapt. At the same time, the media should not be unjustly treated. Why? The media is, in the last analysis, is what? It's a mirror which reflects the reality. We have to change the reality, to change the real situation, and then the media will reflect it, you see. But don't say to the media, please change the reality. No, we cannot do that, you see. At the same time, we have to understand what are the requirements of the youth in these ages, in our life now. It is full of changes, it's full of revolutionary changes, and therefore we have to understand what's going on, you see. And even the media itself, technically speaking, will change, will no longer, during 20 years, will no longer, in my opinion, have printed material in the media, the newspapers, the books. Things will change.
All online.
Yes, everything will be online. So the youth have their own media in the same time, but we can, the state can direct, can rationalize, can guide,
can coach,
coach, and can provide what is required for the rationalization of their life.
All right. Mr. Ambassador, what does it take to reform that important UN body, from your opinion? What does it need?
Well, I think it needs a great deal. First of all, we have to establish equality. I personally, have been very hesitant to agree on the idea of enlarging the Security Council and giving states in Africa and in Latin America and in Asia. The result of this, that all the third world countries are fighting with one another who is going to take the seat. It has made a schism in the united front of the third world. What I think we need is to make a balance between the General Assembly and the Security Council. You know, we have some very flagrant examples where, especially on the Palestinian issue, where you find, for instance, 180 countries in the General Assembly vote for something, and then when it goes to the Security Council, it is vetoed by one country. I think what we need is to make a balance. If we are going to keep the veto, okay, but let us have something to mitigate this. For instance, if a resolution gets 2/3 majority in the General Assembly, it cannot be vetoed by the Security Council.
Right.
I think this is very important, but giving more vetoes to more countries, I think it accentuates the problem rather than it solves it.
Accentuating the problem rather than solving it. What is the way out, Mr. Kholy?
According to this logic, there is no way out. You have to be aware that you keep the setup of the United Nations, the General Assembly and the Security Council, as the ambassador said, don't diffuse this. Keep the Security Council with its own setup, with its own structure, you see. But if you introduce a lot of representatives of other regions in the world, things will be lost. It will be diffused. But even following up this logic, yes, the General Assembly, as far as the settlements resolution about Israel is concerned, the Security Council passed the resolution. We were so surprised that the last steps of the Obama administration passed it without a veto. But look what happened. Until now, Israel is challenging, you see, is looking in the eyes of the Security Council and is continuing building illegal settlements in spite of the resolution, you see. So we have to look for something which can be guarding the safeguard or guarding the resolutions from being challenged and turned into just paperless thing. You see, that's the challenge now.
Right. Well, many challenges. We'll be talking also about the challenges before the new UN Secretary General and more concerning his vision to reform that important world body. Let's first have this report on the UN Secretary General delivering a speech at Cairo University and stressing that there is no plan B to the two-state solution.
UN Secretary General said that there was no plan B to two-state solution during visit to Cairo University. The Israeli-Palestine conflict dominated United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres' statements during his speech at Cairo University last night. He stressed that everything must be done to preserve the possibility of two-state solution. What he called the mother of all conflicts in response to U.S. President Donald Trump shifting his stance on peace in the Middle East by saying he would be open to one and two-state solutions. Delivering a lecture at Cairo University, he underlined the importance of young people in addressing the challenges confronting the contemporary world, including those to peace, impacts of climate change and growing inequalities. Earlier, Trump declared that the United States would no longer insist on the creation of a Palestinian state as part of a peace accord between Israel and the Palestinians. Hosting Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel for the first time since becoming president, Mr. Trump promised a concerted effort to bring the two sides together, suggesting a regional effort involving an array of Arab nations. At the same time, Mr. Trump urged Netanyahu to temporarily stop new housing construction in the West Bank while he pursues a deal, echoing a position past presidents have taken. Trump's position on a two-state solution discarded a policy that has underpinned America's role in Middle East peacemaking since Clinton administration and raised a host of thorny questions. The Palestinians are highly unlikely to accept anything short of a sovereign state. The leaders of both sides face domestic difficulties and seem enthusiastic about the compromises that might be required to get to a mutually agreeable resolution. He emphasized that Israel would have to be flexible in any future talks. As with any successful negotiation, both sides will have to make compromises. Mr. Trump did not address these dynamics, instead emphasizing his confidence that he could produce a breakthrough. Nonetheless, Mr. Netanyahu, who nominally supports a two-state solution, quickly embraced Mr. Trump's declaration, saying he preferred to deal with the substance of a deal rather than labels. He noted that the concept of a two-state solution meant different things to different people, and he repeated his two prerequisites: that the Palestinians recognize Israel as a Jewish state, that Israel maintain security control over the entire West Bank.
So Guterres has stressed that everything must be done in order to preserve the possibility of the two-state solution, to what he called to be the mother of all conflicts. This is how he described it, Mr. Ambassador.
Not a very promising description. The problem in the international arena is that we have the United Nations. The United Nations is the legal and the moral authority in the world. But every legal and moral authority has to have a force to enforce its resolutions. This is not available in the international arena. And unfortunately, the legal and the questions are politicized. If you look, for instance, at you have double standards. If you look, for instance, at the issue of terrorism, you find everybody is defining who is a terrorist according to their agenda. Terrorism has to be defined. If you look at what is happening in Syria, the Americans and the Russians are there engaged. The Americans are calling some factions terrorists, while the Russians are calling them freedom fighters, and vice versa. You cannot have that. In the issue of nuclear proliferation, you have the whole world is standing against Iran's nuclear program, which has not turned into a military program yet, whereas they are turning a blind eye on the Israeli nuclear military program. You have to abolish these double standards in order to be able to formulate a peaceful atmosphere in the international arena. So long as we have the double standards, we will not be able to fulfill the true role of the United Nations.
How can it fulfill its true role, the legal and moral authority in the world, as Mr. Ambassador puts it this way, Mr. Kholy?
No, this is a permanent problem.
Yeah.
I don't think we have a very easy solution to this this problem. If we have a kind of a political utopia, yes, it can be, but now utopias are far from being realized in our age. But I think that's why we have to struggle. We have to talk. We have to resist. We have to insist on the objective norms which we require and which we ask for all the time. And therefore, that's why I'm saying that Mr. Guterres' start is a promising one, just promising. This means that we have some hope. But this hope can be theoretically speaking, can be realized through action, and this hope can be destroyed through non-action or through that the forces of the world, the powerful forces of the world, dictate their own system or their own ideas. Well, this is a conflict, and it's not only this is a struggle. we have to all the time to go through the struggle and to persist and to insist on what we require and what we call for. But at the same time, this is the real world, you see. And I think for the Middle East, now, it's one of the most miserable situations, most miserable periods of time in which we live, because the Middle East, as we know it and as we grow on it, somewhere it has oil, it has history, it has a lot of countries which were established. Look at Syria, for example, you see. But now it is in a mess. Unless we try to reform the Middle East, unless we wipe out the terrorism, you see, unless we separate, this is my opinion, separate between the religious trends and the everyday life, unless we all do these things, this is our problem. This is our duty. We have to start this in our region, and then we look at the other world, the outside world, to help us or to cooperate with us. It is our devoir, our duty first, the Egyptians or the Arabs in general.
Right. The duty as Egyptians and Arabs and a sense of cooperation, how can you assess, Mr. Ambassador, a sense of cooperation between the UN World Body and the Arab League in the upcoming future?
If you want to make a meaningful relationship, it has to be a relationship between equals. Unfortunately, the Arab League is a reflection of what is happening in the Arab world. We have in the Arab world now countries that are failing, countries that are engaged in destroying themselves, a deep confrontation between countries. You do not have a joint Arab front. If you look, for instance, at what is happening in Syria, the Arabs do not agree on what the solution in Syria is. If you look at several other problems, you do not have a unified, even vis-a-vis Israel, you do not have a unified Arab attitude towards Israel. You have to unify an international or a regional body. Does not have meaning except if there is consensus between the members on their outlook into the future. Unfortunately, this does not exist within the Arab world.
How can we make it exist in a way or another?
I think we have to convince each other that, first of all, to respect the opposing ideas, to understand that no country will have all its requirements. It will have to give in to the requirements of other countries so that we can be able to coexist. But if everybody looks at the game as a zero-sum game, what I gain is what you lose, we will never be able to.
We should look at issues out of a sense of integration.
Indeed.
Rather. Well, Mr. Kholy, talking about the United Nations and Africa, and in the beginning of the discussion, you mentioned that important file opening to Africa, understanding African challenges, and that important file. How do you see Guterres dealing with the African file?
As I said, I think Mr. Guterres, through his experience as an eminent politician in his country and through his country's experience, positive and negative, with the African continent, I think he is better aware than any other Secretary General, with the exception of Dr. Boutros Ghali and Mr. Kofi Annan, who are Africans by birth. I think he's aware and he knows the problems of Africa. Africa has a lot of problems. First of all, we have terrorism also. Look at what's going on in Boko Haram, with the Mali and Al-Qaeda of the North African place, and Al-Shabaab in Somalia, and all these things. So it is threatened, as I say, by the terrorism, in the same time the underdevelopment, and in the same time, this is very important, sometimes the bouts of drought. Now, in some countries in Eastern African region, they have a lot of the disaster of drought, no rain, you see, or the less rainfall, which is annual, but now this year it is so less than the normal thing. I think the United Nations has a certain or a unique responsibility vis-a-vis the African continent, and in the same time the new generations of the Africans themselves. And I think Egypt, let me talk as an Egyptian now, Egypt now tries to restore its status, which we enjoyed in the 60s and maybe until the 50s and the 60s, as the Cairo's the beacon of independence at that time for the African continent. And in the same time, we had some relations, industrial relations, production relations, educational relations, cultural relations, and we cut these relations during the 70s until, let's say, 5 years ago. And therefore, our awareness as a pivotal country in Africa, you see, that we have to restore these things according to what's going on, although we had now we have a lot of competitors. We have China, you see, we have Brazil, even some Arab countries, oil countries now are working and we have Israel in the same time. So I think we have to restore all these things, aware of the novelties of the situation, but with the help of the UNESCO, with the help of the United Nations, because Africa is a very promising region.
Definitely, great potential.
You see, great potential, and therefore they call it the virgin continent, because it has a lot of things unexploited until now.
Yeah, lots unexplored yet. Well, he talked about climate change at Cairo University, Mr. Ambassador, and setting a vision on that issue is very important. And you earlier spoke on the show of how this important file should be addressed and given even more space in the media. What did he recall concerning climate change, and what's his vision?
I think he spoke generally, he did not go into details, about the dangers that climate change is posing. I mean, even in Egypt here, we are not giving this very serious threat its due concern. There was some time ago, I think it was the Minister of Irrigation, Egyptian Minister of Irrigation, he spoke about coastal regions of Egypt being flooded by the sea. He spoke about an exodus of the people on the coastal areas.
It's among the developmental goals.
A very serious problem. Unfortunately, the third world in general, are not doing what is necessary. One of the major threats that is causing climate change is the burning of fossil fuels. And recently, China has inaugurated the largest solar energy generation program in the world. The United States is developing new techniques in solar energy, what is called molten salt technology, using solar energy. In the Middle East, where we have an abundance of sunshine, I don't think we are doing enough in this. There are other more futuristic programs and research. There is, for instance, in a program called the ITER, International Tokamak Experimental Reactor, which is fusion rather than fission.
Right.
Clean energy. This
green and
this program is sponsored by the United States, the European Union, Russia, South Korea, Japan, China, India. Not one Arab country is a party in this. Another thing, for instance, one of the major regions in the world dedicated to monitoring the ozone layer and the climate change is in Antarctica. There are over 80 scientific research stations monitoring in Antarctica. European, South American, United States, Russia, not one Arab country is there. So these are things that we have to engage in. And this is the role of the Arab League. I mean, the Arab League is not only dedicated to politics, it should be also dedicate itself
to futuristic
research
and futuristic challenges. Right. Concerning futuristic challenges, since we're talking challenges also, what are the challenges before the man? What are the challenges before Guterres? Is it only reforming the UN body? Is it seeing eye to eye concerning regional issues that need solutions? What more?
I think his perspective should be much more wider than his predecessors. His predecessors mostly were concentrating on the political dimension, the political problems. This is normal, yes. But as the ambassador said, the environmental issue, it is now a pressing thing. And it is not only the political problem can be solved, if not today, it can be solved
it's not
tomorrow.
a luxury, it's
a necessity through negotiations and even through war. You see, but the environmental catastrophe cannot be absorbed.
It cannot be ignored.
Yes, ignored. And the danger, it is a global one, you see. And let us have an example. You know that with the fossil burning, fossil using the coal and oil, this means that you have the emissions, the carbon emissions, which raises the temperature in the atmosphere. This temperature in the atmosphere is raised even in the northern part of the world. It means that the ice mountains, which are from the beginning of the world, some of them are melting down. And if they melt down, they will raise the sea level. If the sea level raises to a certain dangerous degree, it can drown a lot of Nile deltas in the world, and the most candidate for this drowning and this catastrophe is the Nile Delta, the delta of the Nile, and deltas in Bangladesh. This is something we are talking about that, and we have been reading and writing about that, but no one is absorbing the gross danger which is threatening our just the existence of Egypt as such. You see, well, we have to anticipate the problem, we have to analyze it, we have to mobilize all our scientific know-how in order to confront this anticipated thing and to try to defend ourselves about that. This is an example. We are not talking about intimidation, but we are talking about what science is giving us some menace or some warning about what's going on. Right. That's it. As far as the Arab countries, the ambassador said that he didn't see as an Arab country in the group which is talking about the solar energy. The Arab countries are preoccupied with their own disasters. Now we have a lot of disasters in every Arab country. You see, I think the Arab countries should, and the only candidate in this respect is, humbly speaking, is called Egypt. Egypt should be the pioneer in this, because it is, thank God, still until now, Egypt
Definitely
is
stable.
against, immune from the scourges which is threatening the mere existence of some states like Syria, Iraq, or Libya.
Right. Mr. Ambassador, talking about Guterres again, and as we are wrapping up, and we've read messages that he had sent throughout his visit, and Egypt, was his last leg in the Middle East. We're prioritizing your agenda. If you were in his boots, what should be the most important files that he should tackle?
You have, if you are going to lead an organization, you start by the crisis management. There are crises in the world. In the Middle East, people are dying, refugees are drowning in the sea. Some other places, I will not fail to mention what is happening to the Burmese Muslims, for instance, the Rohingyas. All of these, this is crisis management. And then you go to the wider sphere of things. You have, today there is a very dangerous situation growing, for instance, between the over North Korea and what is happening in the South China Sea, China and the United States and Japan. So these are volatile issues that have to take a priority. And then there are the global issues that, like, for instance, the global warming, the issue of the poverty, the issue of the concentration of scientific knowledge in a very few centers in the world and depriving the whole humanity from this, enabling the future generations. These, I think, are the issues that should be tackled.
Definitely, and while wrapping up in a minute, Mr. Kholy, since we are wrapping up our episode, talking about the soft power, and as His Excellency has mentioned, being in Cairo University, that's a recognition of Egypt's cultural heritage. What else should be on Guterres' agenda concerning reviving cultural heritage and at the same time bearing into consideration the role that soft power plays in the world today?
Your question is related to what we are aspiring at, is trying to re-educate our youthful generations in order that they feel proud, you see, of their culture and of their tradition. And the word culture and word tradition does not necessarily relate to religion. It is our creative contribution to humanity and to civilization along a lot of ages. Luckily enough, we have this happy coincidence that Egypt started with the dawn of civilizations, with the pharaonic civilization from Khufu and the pyramids until Akhenaton and the unity of God, you see, and then across the Coptic and Demotic civilization, Coptic tradition, and then the Arab and Islamic tradition. We have to stick to our language first of all. Our language means the Arabic, because I, as a writer, and as a media man, I'm now monitoring the deterioration of our language. Language is not just what
language is identity.
It's what we talk. You said identity, yes. In our theory of the Arab nationalism, Sati al-Husari, he said this: language is our identity. For me, language is the way of thinking. If your language deteriorates, this means that your thinking is deteriorating, and that you became a captive to the other who speaks English, French, Spanish, whatever. So I think, first of all, in order to revive our tradition, you see, we have to reinvigorate and we have to revive our language.
Thank you so much, and our time is finally up. Allow me to thank my dear guest for tonight, Excellency Ambassador Mohamed Shazly, former Assistant Foreign Minister. Thank you very much for coming to our debate tonight.
My pleasure, thank you.
And I thank very much renowned UN media expert and consultant, Mr. Mohamed Kholy. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much
for being with us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
And I'm Taghreed Hussein, thanking you all for watching.